Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The Prairie provinces have suspended the use of a certain COVID-19 vaccine for anyone under the age of 55. We have the details. BC has brought in more restrictions due to rising COVID-19 cases. We will explain which businesses will be impacted the most. And your local MP is about to receive a raise, and that doesn't sit well with many, including the Alberta director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba are all suspending use of the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine for people under the age of 55. The decisions follow a recommendation by Canada's National Advisory Committee on Immunization amid concerns over some vaccine recipients in Europe developing rare blood clots. Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Hinshaw, says there's no evidence of this happening anywhere in Canada, but the suspension will allow Health Canada to conduct more research. The Alberta government says as of March 29th, just over 620,000 COVID-19 vaccine doses have been administered in the province. There were 576 new cases of COVID-19 reported over the past 24 hours. There are now 301 people in hospital battling the virus, including 58 in intensive care. In total, there are 7,975 active cases in the province. Now here in the South Zone, there are currently 815 active cases, including 491 in Lethbridge and just 19 in Medicine Hat. Fortunately, almost 138,000 Albertans have also recovered from the novel coronavirus. A draft elementary school curriculum released by the Alberta government stresses fundamentals in math and literacy, along with how to research and to think critically. Education Minister Adriana LaGrange says parents of younger students asked for a move away from what she calls education fads and unproven methods of learning. NDP education critic Sarah Hoffman says she's relieved that computer science and financial literacy are still in the draft curriculum. Hoffman does say, however, that LaGrange failed by not including First Nations history until grades 4 and 5, when instruction on European history starts in grade 1. Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Newdorf shared his reaction to some of the pushback on this new curriculum.
I believe that it's all there, and the curriculum does include it, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit content in varying degrees. But again, there's varying degrees of concepts, whether we're talking about math or linguistics or whatever. But I believe that if you take it as a whole and a complete program, which it's meant to be, no one's meant to just go to kindergarten or grade 1 and then graduate, right? It is meant to be a progressive learning from kindergarten all the way through grade 12.
Lethbridge School Division Board of Trustees Chair Christine Light says they're currently reviewing the revised curriculum. She says it's important that it reflects the diversity in our community and empowers students with the skills they need to engage the world as innovative thinkers. The Lethbridge School Division has been dealing with some online bullying. The schools, along with members of the Lethbridge Police Department, are investigating the incident. In a statement released earlier today, officials for the Lethbridge School Division had this to say: "The incident demonstrates that we have work to do in our schools and our community to overcome racism. Our high schools plan to facilitate discussions that will illuminate the ongoing issues that are present in our schools related to racism. It is our desire to move our collective school communities to places that do indeed embrace dignity and respect." Lethbridge Police is applauding the new law to further reduce domestic violence. Officially known as the Disclosure to Protect Against Domestic Violence Act, or CLARES law, goes into effect on April the 1st. It will advise anyone who's potentially at risk from their partner and what level of risk that may be. Applications will be available on the government's website. Lethbridge Police say CLARES law will provide another valuable tool to help reduce incidents of domestic violence. Last year, LPS responded to 1,667 calls regarding reports of domestic violence. Of those, 1,377 charges were laid. Beginning April 1st, your local MP will be receiving a pay raise. Now that doesn't sit well with many, since Canada lost more than 700,000 private sector jobs during the pandemic last year. Joining me now to discuss this increase for our politicians is Franco Terrazano, Alberta Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Franco, what does an MP currently make? How about our minister or our prime minister?
Well, our federal politicians in Ottawa are making a ton of money. Your basic MP member of parliament is making over $180,000 per year. Your minister is making close to $270,000. And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is making well north of $300,000 every single year.
So what kind of a raise are we talking about for these MPs?
Well, the raise that is set to occur on April 1st is going to see your MPs make an extra about $3,200. The Prime Minister is going to be raking in an extra $6,400. And, you know, with what's going on in the private sector, so many people losing their jobs, taking their pay cuts, and businesses closing down, I think a lot of Canadians, it's going to be a really hard pill to swallow for them.
So you feel these raises are really a slap in the face to so many taxpayers?
So for the many struggling Canadian taxpayers who may have lost their job, taken a pay cut, I think these raises are rightly going to feel like a slap in the face. Remember, hundreds of thousands of Canadians have lost their job over the past year. And this is the second pay raise that MPs have gotten during this severe COVID-19 downturn. And you know what? It shouldn't be rocket science for our MPs to get off their butts and put an end to these automatic pay raises.
That was Franco Terrazano, Alberta Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, joining me from Calgary. In 2018, Maxime Bernier created the People's Party of Canada after losing to Andrew Scheer in the leadership race for the Conservative Party of Canada. Bernier says that he knows the PPC doesn't stand much of a chance in the next federal election, but raising their voter percentage is top of mind and their top priority. Bernier also added that the PPC wants to remove the Firearms Act and enact new legislation if they're voted in.
What the Trudeau government is doing right now is not the solution. We believe that peaceful and law-abiding Canadians that have firearms are not the problem. The problem is when you have firearms that are coming from other countries and illegal firearms. I think we must give more resources to the RCMP to fight that. But law-abiding Canadians that have firearms, we must not fight them. They have a property right, and we will respect the property right of the gun owners.
If elected, the PPC would look to mandate the future change to gun legislation only be made through Parliament. The Alberta government sent out an alert earlier this month warning of zebra mussels imported through mossballs in the province. The highly invasive species has found its way into mossballs through major pet supply chains and local retailers. As Ainsley O'Reilly explains now, the zebra mussels are a major threat to southern Alberta's water supply.
Over 800 aquatic and gardening retailers, as well as 3 major Canadian chains, Pet Value, Petland, and PetSmart, were instructed by Alberta's Environmental Protection Agency to destroy any mossballs they received before January 1st.
The United States actually alerted to the finding of having zebra mussels being found on these mossballs.
Zebra mussels were detected within the mossballs. Aquatic experts say the tiny organisms originate from Eastern Europe and multiply at a rapid pace.
Produce anywhere between 30,000 to 1 million eggs a year. Most of them survive because they're invasive. They don't have any natural predators. They don't have any natural diseases.
Their shells grow up to 3 centimeters in size and pose a major threat to food chains while clogging water systems, including precious irrigation in southern Alberta.
We are concerned about all the infrastructure. Southern Alberta is definitely sensitive to that fact in all the irrigation infrastructure that is established, which could easily be plugged by mussels attaching to their hard surfaces throughout their pipelines.
2,500 mossballs have been confiscated and mussels have been found in the province. Head to mywildalberta.com for instructions on how to destroy them. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Fire investigators determined that the blaze, which leveled a home on the city's west side, was deemed accidental. In fact, it started at a stove in the kitchen. The fire occurred Sunday afternoon at a home located in the 100 block of Trent Road West. The home was completely destroyed, with the damage estimated at $300,000. Fortunately, there were no injuries, and firefighters were able to save the adjacent properties. Due to the current dry weather conditions, Lethbridge County has issued a fire ban on all open fires within its municipal boundaries. Under the ban, all fire permits are canceled and no new permits will be issued. Burning of any kind is not permitted, including yard waste or household garbage. Fires contained in a cooking or heating appliance such as a barbecue stove or heater are exempt. The fire ban officially came into effect at 12 p.m. on Tuesday. Creating a new bicycle and pedestrian path between Coaldale and Lethbridge just took one step closer to becoming a reality. Local businessman and philanthropist Cor Van Ray just donated $1 million towards the Link Regional Pathway project. The 15-kilometer paved, barrier-free path is now shovel-ready for construction thanks to the large donation. Mr. Van Ray was an avid cyclist for many years, and he said he was excited to make the donation to create an accessible pathway in our very own backyard. The 42nd annual Rattler Run hosted by Medicine Hat College is coming up on April the 24th. As Micah Quinn explains now, this year's event will be virtual, and officials say that will allow participants from all over the province to join in on the fun.
Participants can take part in a 3K, 5K, or 10K run.
The big thing we're focusing on this year is we're calling it walk, run, roll, because we want it to be inclusive. We want everybody to take part in this, whatever way they see fit. In a normal year when we're outside, we can have anywhere from 600 to 1,000 racers. Last year, I think virtual race, we had about 450, and in 24 hours of our registration being open, we are already up to 100.
Sharp says that this race gets people outside and helps deal with their physical and mental health during the pandemic.
And in terms of mental health, again, we've seen mental health numbers kind of rise to a concerning level. But one of the best things you can do for mental health is physical fitness. And getting out to walk, run, or roll is just a great first step. And we're hoping that this can springboard into more and more people being active.
Runners can post on social media using the hashtag RattlerRun2021 to showcase times, routes, or how they participated in the run.
But we do have a gold, silver, and bronze prize pack that we're going to give out, which includes all kinds of stuff: Rattler swag, gift certificates to various restaurants and local businesses. So there is that portion, and that hashtag allows people to be entered into the draw to win those prizes.
Interested competitors can visit rattlerrun.ca to register for the event. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The government of Alberta announced today that it is now accepting grant applications for Alberta Culture Days. Community groups can apply for the money up to $10,000 to plan and hold events showcasing local talent to help boost cultural programs in various communities. Applications will be accepted until May 7th. Culture Days events will take place throughout the province during the month of September. Last year, 47 communities took part in 943 Alberta Culture Day events, with most being held online. The city of Lethbridge now has close to 500 cases of COVID-19. Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman says he's concerned about the rising number of cases. He says if more is not being done to adhere to provincial health regulations, more people will potentially die.
Our numbers have gone in the wrong direction compared to those in the province. It's an issue of great concern, and basically we're pleading with everyone to have the patience, make sure we keep each other safe. Where we're in a situation where we have a significant rise in cases, and we see the variants becoming a significant portion of those cases, we certainly are putting each other at risk, and people may needlessly die if we don't adhere to the Alberta health regulations.
Catch the full interview with Mayor Spearman as he discusses some of the biggest challenges Lethbridge is facing right now. That's coming up later in our broadcast. Saskatchewan's opposition party is calling on Premier Scott Moe to extend extra COVID-19 restrictions to Moose Jaw. Moe recently reinstated restrictions in Regina, which has seen a huge influx of variant cases that include staying at home and avoiding having guests. The Health Ministry began asking Moose Jaw residents to do the same due to increased cases there. Health officials are asking Moose Jaw residents to work from home, mask up in public, and avoid any unnecessary travel. BC's health minister says the high test positivity rate for COVID-19 in his province is one of the reasons why BC is introducing new public health restrictions. Adrian Dick says over the past week, the percentage of tests that came back was too high at 10%. They were between 6 and 7% a few weeks earlier. Dick says the figure represents a large COVID-19 growth that required action in the form of new public health orders. The orders included a 3-week closure of the Whistler Blackcomb Ski Resort, also banning on indoor dining, indoor fitness, and faith gatherings. Now, BC's Provincial Health Officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, says the new rules will remain in effect until April the 19th.
Contact tracing has shown us that these settings amplify the spread, and as a result, activities indoors in these locations need to be on hold for now. The previously announced order variants for limited indoor worship services that we have worked very carefully with our faith leaders across the province will now need to be suspended.
Ontario reported 2,336 new cases of COVID-19 today, along with 14 more deaths linked to the virus. Health Minister Christine Elliott says 727 of the cases are in Toronto. There are 434 in the Peel region, 229 in York, and 123 in Hamilton. Ontario reports that close to 1,100 people are currently hospitalized with the virus, with 387 in intensive care. China and Iran have signed a cooperation agreement for 25 years. The deal will include Chinese investments in key sectors such as energy and infrastructure. I asked our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari what kinds of implications that could potentially bring.
This is not Chinese investments in Iran. This is Chinese influence, not just in Iran, not just for the Iranian people, 80 million people who will be affected by this. This is giving them access to grow the Chinese empire into the Middle East, to give them the infrastructures, to give them access to information, to give them access to people, to trade. Everything will be, they basically bought Iran, a nation of 80 million people.
Lisa will also discuss reports of a new North Korean guided missile and what that means for us here in the West. That's coming up after business news. Well, it was great to see the sunshine again earlier today, but still below normal temperature-wise. Fortunately, a warming trend is on the way. A complete look at the weather picture is on deck. It was mostly a clear day here in much of southwestern Alberta, but fairly cool. Jeanette Rocher is back with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, it'll begin to feel a lot more like spring on maybe Wednesday or Thursday of this week.
Yeah, it was a bit of a cooler one today for sure, with the temperatures just barely reaching over that 0 degree mark. But you're right, Hal, it is going to get quite a bit warmer coming up on Wednesday and Thursday as we look towards those teen temperatures for the rest of the week here. Still contending with those gusty winds too, 50k winds overnight tonight. -2 is the overnight low. Into tomorrow, 60 km/h winds, but sunshine, 13 degrees as we get into those teens. Look at the temperature on a Thursday, 17 the high, lots of sunshine, 14 the high for Friday with sunny skies, mix of sun and cloud on Saturday with a high of 18 degrees, 11 degrees with increasing clouds on a Sunday overnight. On Sunday night, looking for a 60% chance of showers into Monday morning. That should clear up by Monday, giving us a mix of sun and cloud and a high of 12 degrees. So loving these double digits and teen temperatures. Today was basically the coolest day of the whole week, but mainly keeping above those seasonal averages, 9 being the average high for this time of year, -4 the average low. 27 degrees was our high temperature on this day back in 2004. Wouldn't it be nice to be right there right now? I would love it. -17 was the chilliest day on record. That was happening in 1954. 7:12 is when the sun rose this morning and sunset this evening, just before 8 p.m., right at 7:59 p.m. So let's take a look at the rest of the country. What's going to happen tomorrow? Well, I will tell you, over on the West Coast, lots of sunshine. 12 degrees the high in both Victoria and Vancouver. Feeling a little bit cooler by the water there in Vancouver. Edmonton and Calgary both sitting at 13 degrees tomorrow. The winds at 20, gusting to 40 kilometers per hour. So a little bit lighter than they are in Lethbridge. Not so bad at all. Now, following that low pressure system that came through the prairies, moving easterly from Saskatchewan to Manitoba, bringing with it the blowing snow, that's all dying down by tomorrow. 4 degrees the high for Saskatoon, 6 for Regina. Over in Winnipeg, also not so gusty with the winds. They had like 60k winds today, only 15 kilometers per hour tomorrow. So that's good news for you guys. Over in this area here, Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal, periods of rain and showers throughout the day. Should be clearing up by the afternoon though. And then in Atlantic Canada, not so bad either. Look at these temperatures, 14 the high for Fredericton. Same thing for Halifax, lots of sunshine. Not so much wind either. It's gonna be lovely, 13 the high in Charlottetown, St. John's is the only one really giving us some problems. 60% of flurries and some 60K winds expected tomorrow with a high of only -1. So there you have it. That is your Tuesday forecast.
Experts have boarded the colossal container ship that was stuck sideways for nearly a week in the Suez Canal. Questions have been raised about the incident that shook the global shipping industry and clogged one of the world's most vital waterways. A canal pilot says engineers are inspecting the Ever Given for damage and trying to determine the cause for her grounding. The ship was safely anchored today in the Great Bitter Lake. That's a stretch of waterway between the north and south ends of the canal after salvage teams succeeded in freeing this skyscraper-length vessel earlier yesterday. Members of the Commons Committee grilled executives of Rogers and Shaw Communications after they said their merger would increase competition and benefit Canadians. Tory telecom critic Pierre Poilievre says Shaw is downplaying the importance of its Freedom Mobile wireless carrier as a fourth competitor in some markets. NDP MP Brian Mass says he does not see how Rogers taking over a competitor will be good for competition in the long run. Both Rogers and Shaw say the combined company is necessary to make infrastructure investments to remain competitive. It appears as though complaints about internet service in Canada have been on the rise. The Commission for Complaints for Telecom and Television Services says complaints soared 50% during the latter half of 2020. The agency says of the more than 9,100 cases it handled during that time, close to 1,300 were about inadequate internet service. The overall number of complaints for all types of service monitored by the CCTS was also up 6% from 2019. Southwest Airlines says it is expanding all of its Boeing fleet with an order for 100 MAX jets instead of buying planes from Europe's Airbus. Financial terms of the deal were not disclosed. The MAX 7 lists for almost $100 million, although airlines routinely receive huge discounts. The new MAX 7s will replace Southwest's aging fleet of Boeing 737 and 700s, providing better fuel mileage. Boeing shares rose 2.3% following the announcement. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 13 points on the day to finish at 18,706. The Dow was down 104 points to 33,067. The S&P 500 was down 12 points to 3959, and the Nasdaq was down 14 points on the day to 13,045. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.13 to $60.43 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 3 cents to $2.62 US. Gold was down 8 cents to $16.8512 US an ounce, and silver was up a cent to $24.04 US an ounce. Wheat is at $300 per metric ton, barley's at $310, canola's at $7.40, and corn is at $329 per metric ton. Live cattle were unchanged at $120.98, feeder cattle were down 25 cents to $146.83, and lean hogs were up 55 cents to $100.93. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 79.20 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba are all suspending use of the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine for people under the age of 55. The decisions follow a recommendation by Canada's National Advisory Committee on Immunization amid concerns over some vaccine recipients in Europe developing rare blood clots. It appears as though the Iranian regime has infiltrated many of our social media platforms, including Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will explain why the Islamic nation is trying to dominate big tech platforms in just a moment. The large freighter weighing over 220,000 tons was finally freed in the Suez Canal. It was stuck there for more than a week. To discuss this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, freeing that ship called the Evergreen from the canal allowed hundreds of other ships to finally get moving with their cargo as well.
Talk about a traffic jam. This is a crazy story, and perhaps more than the economic side effects of this, $9 billion a day, and beyond the logistics of this. How are we in the year 2021 and we can't figure out how to get a stuck ship out of a canal? It was the bottom line of understanding how commerce works in this day and age, and how important the Suez Canal is in bringing the East and West together. I mean, this is a tremendous canal. there's so many different routes that rely on this canal, and again, that number is just so astounding, $9 billion a day, and they couldn't figure this out for almost a week. So we're glad that it's out, and I think they're going to be looking at not letting this happen again in the near future.
Yeah, 11 tugboats later, all the engineers, incredible that they finally got it released. That was one big ship. Lisa, it appears as though the Iranian regime has infiltrated big tech platforms including Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, in an effort to silence critics of the regime and to boost Iranian propaganda. Now, don't these companies have security and monitor for that kind of infiltration?
But do they want to root out this kind of infiltration, or are they okay with it? Or do they just stop people like Donald Trump and other conservatives who they don't agree with, and then allow Javad Zarif and Rouhani and Khamenei, the leaders of the Iranian regime, who spew hatred, who spew terrorist propaganda, to have platforms, to have, obviously their own Twitter accounts, and to use those Twitter accounts to say very anti-American things? They're allowed to have them. Not just that, but their own people, talk about being hypocrites, their own people can't go on these platforms to freely speak their minds and to post what they'd like. So, this is something that the Iranian regime is masterful at doing, at silencing the opposition, silencing the critics, and yet having their own platform, having this handbook of social media tricks on how to get their propaganda out. And that's exactly what they have done. They've infiltrated big tech to get their own messages out while silencing the opposition.
Iran and China have signed a 25-year cooperation agreement, Lisa, between the two allies. The signing of the agreement will include Chinese investments in key sectors such as energy and infrastructure. So what does that mean for us here in the West?
My gosh, Hal, this is the biggest news story in a long time, and no one's really covering it and understanding the extent at which why this is so important and why this will change the course of East-West relations for a long time to come. And I'll break it down for you. This is not Chinese investments in Iran. This is Chinese influence, not just in Iran, not just for the Iranian people, 80 million people who will be affected by this. This is giving them access to grow the Chinese empire into the Middle East, to give them the infrastructures, to give them access to information, to give them access to people, to trade. Everything will be, they basically bought Iran, a nation of 80 million people. And then, it really corners the West, the P5+1, or I should say the United States, from getting back into an Iran nuclear deal. The Iran regime now has an upper hand because they come to the table knowing that they've been backed up by the Chinese. They say the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and that's exactly what the Chinese and the Iranians did. They got together, both being sanctioned by the US, both having issues right now, trying to figure things out with the United States, with Biden, a new president in the United States. But this does not look good. This does not give the West an upper hand in dealing with our biggest two threats, which are the Iranian regime and the Chinese government. This is a very important story. The fact that this deal happened is extremely problematic, and it's going to mean for the United States to get back to thinking about what they're going to do with Chinese policy and Iran policy.
It's amazing too. I mean, you hear about agreements 5, 10, 15 years, but 25-year cooperation agreement between Iran and China. Now, speaking of China, Lisa, what's the latest since the two trials of the Canadians, Michael Spavor, Michael Kovrig, who were each charged with spying? Do we know what happened since the trial? Were they found guilty? Any sentence carried out?
Nothing has been announced. I know people in Canada and all over, the United States just issued a statement saying that this is very problematic and that we are holding the government of China responsible to give us some transparency regarding this case. For those who have been following it, these two have been apprehended for 2 years without any sentencing, without any explanation. Obviously, we understand that it's a tit for tat for the arrest of the Huawei chief in Vancouver that occurred around that time. But what we do know is that the closed door trials are now over. They were over probably approximately a week ago or so. But the Chinese have said that they will release the statements at the time of their choosing. They will give out any information and that's exactly what the Chinese do at the time of their choosing. Meaning we won't know anything, and their futures, their destiny really hangs in the balance. We will hear when we hear, and it's really unfortunate. But we are thankfully getting a lot lot of international cooperation on this. It's bringing the US and Canada closer to at least discuss one common enemy right now, and that is the Chinese government, which is not giving any transparency to anyone on any topic.
Yeah, just praying with all my heart that the two Michaels will be released and are headed home soon. Lisa, still in Asia, there are reports that North Korea has been testing a new guided missile. How concerned should we be here in North America?
My goodness, Hal, it's like everywhere. It's like when the babysitter kind of leaves the room and you're like, everything's going crazy. Everywhere you look, there is some sort of chaos. And, our enemies, so to speak, and I don't want to call them enemies, but these are the rogue dictators of the world that were looking forward to a Biden presidency, that were looking forward to a changing of the guard that would bring in a guard that is much more lax. And North Korea is no exception. They're flexing their muscles. They have tested missiles. They have criticized the United Nations for criticizing them. And the list goes on. And it's not just North Korea. We're looking obviously again at China, at Iran, at the terror organizations. We're looking at the migrants that are marching our southern border. So, I think it's very telling of what those who were maybe a bit more apprehensive or fearful of a Trump foreign policy are now looking to President Biden as, an easier time to get away with things. And North Korea is one of them.
Now, speaking of U.S. President Joe Biden, Lisa, the Biden administration projects the number of unaccompanied kids crossing the border could go from 16,000 this month to more than 26,000 by September. That's according to a recent document leak. Now, explain the significance of this.
Okay, this is horrific. First of all, those numbers might be much higher and astronomically so, only because we don't have any transparency about what's going on at the border. We have no transparency. Reporters are not allowed to visit these facilities. We know that they're not being COVID safe. We know that there is no way to vet these individuals. And again, they're bringing their children. They're bringing in perhaps, unvetted individuals, those who are sick, those who are, on the march for, running from the law from wherever they're coming from. But the issue is, even at best, even if they are, benign, lovely individuals, this is a very difficult situation. We have a very hard time absorbing these individuals. We're having a homelessness crisis here in the United States. We're not able to absorb our own, let alone let in these individuals. And it goes back to that, reality versus ideology. The ideology being, we want to let these people in. That's our intent. The intent is lovely. But how about the practice of it? Can we absorb the numbers? Can we bring in these individuals? Can we vet them properly? Can we ensure that we're not going to have a super spreader event by packing these individuals? I read somewhere that a room that was supposed to fit about 60 capacity is now fitting 700 people, for example. So this can't be safe. This can't be good at a time where we're told to wear double masks. And Joe Biden doubled down on that statement where you have to wear your masks. You have to wear your masks. Well, how about this crisis? And why are we being hypocritical? If we're trying to keep people safe here in this country, then we should keep them safe at the border as well.
Lisa, Fox News is reporting that the group Antifa armed rioters who descended and created havoc on the Oregon State Capitol. It's no wonder, the protests went as long as they did and continue.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It circles back around. Obviously, this has nothing to do with the George Floyd case, but it does circle back around to his trial beginning now, and they're continuing to protest. This is just being in perpetual victimhood, perpetual protest mode. Antifa has lost its mind. It always had lost its mind, but right now it's just wanting to fight back against the system, and that's all that they know. Particularly in Oregon, we have friends of ours who live there and have a medical practice, and they have said there has not been one day where you don't see this kind of protesting happening on the street corners where our office is located. So it hasn't stopped. We're hearing about it in the news here and there. We hear trickles of reports, but the truth is, we have to get these hoodlums off the street. We have to get this ideology off of our streets and out of the minds of young people, that the government is not bad, that the United States is not bad, that our history is not bad. But we can learn from a lot of our mistakes. No country is perfect, but we go forward and we try to do better.
Now, nearly a year after George Floyd died, Lisa, the people of Minneapolis are still demanding justice, and the city is once again in the spotlight. Opening arguments have begun on the former police officer who was seen kneeling on Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes during that fateful day in May of last year.
Yes. a lot of businesses here are bracing for more protests. We don't know what will happen when the verdict is announced. We don't know what the verdict will be, but we do know that they had a very difficult time choosing their jury because of the multi-million-dollar settlement that was given to George Floyd's family. Obviously, that tips the balance a bit. But we'll have to wait and see. Again, nobody wanted this gentleman to die. Nobody wanted this violence to be carried out in the aftermath of all of this. But I think it was taken to a place where it shouldn't have been taken, and it was connected to social issues that it had nothing to do with. And we're here again having this conversation about racism and about all kinds of isms that probably do exist, but not to the extent at which people are saying they do. I think the people of this country and around the world are better than what is being portrayed out on the streets, or what we're being accused of here in the United States and elsewhere. But I hope for better days. I hope that this trial will put this story to an end, and the family can find peace, and the business owners whose lives were destroyed can find peace and move forward and rebuild, and we can look back on this and say we're going to move forward from it. We're not going to go back to that dark place.
Meanwhile, in Nashville, Tennessee, the mayor there has declared a state of emergency due to flooding in the area. Tell me more about that.
Yes, we're having a few different natural disasters here in the United States, tornadoes and flooding. And in Tennessee, there is a state of emergency. I know a lot of major area establishments were shut down because of the flooding and the rains, and we wish them the best. We're thinking of you.
Lisa, here's kind of a cool story. Following the Abraham Accords, the deal to normalize relations between Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan, the Israeli government is preparing for the arrival of Muslim tourists. That's historic.
Absolutely historic, and it's not just the one way. It's multilateral. You'll see Israeli tourists in Arab countries, and you'll see all kinds of people traveling throughout the Middle East. And this is just the beginning. This is the future of the Middle East, where people can enjoy each other's cultures in peace and put the past and their history behind them, and they can look forward to years and years of collaboration, of tourism, of sharing technology, of sharing medical technology, and I really am excited for this. I mean, I used to travel to the Middle East all the time for work. I haven't been there in a long time because of COVID, but hopefully next time I go, I'll be able to visit multiple countries and not have to get a clean passport. If you go to Israel and go to their neighboring Arab nations, it used to be problematic, and now it won't be. And I look forward to a time to hear the stories of weddings going. I should say Jewish weddings happening in Dubai and vice versa. And this is really the cultural exchange that the future will be made of, particularly in the Middle East.
Well, and think about the amount of money that's going to be brought to the Israeli economy as well at the same time, opening up the floodgates to allow a lot more tourists into the region.
Absolutely, and it goes both ways. I think the Abraham Accords are going to be proven to be one of the most historic and beneficial accords that were ever to be signed between peoples, particularly of the Middle East. This has been since biblical times. We've talked about the Arabs versus the Israelis, and now we can say that they were brought together because of shared interests, and that is the economy and prosperity and a future that they can both share together.
There's one country I've always wanted to visit was Morocco. Ever since I watched some of those classic James Bond movies, Morocco, I'm like, that looks like a spectacular country. Have you been?
I've never been, but I'd love to. I'd love to go to all of those countries you listed.
Yeah, we'll put it on our bucket list. U.S. political reporter and foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari, thanks for joining me from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.
Once again, we're delighted to have Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman join us here on the show to talk about some of the current issues happening in the Windy City. Mayor Spearman, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Always happy to talk to you, Hal. Thank you.
Listen, I got to ask you something. Do you ever get used to the wind in the city? I've been here 4 years, man. I'm still not used to it.
Well, we've had some fairly windy days this year, windier than most. I've been here 40 years, and I think a couple of the days when the wind's been over 100 kilometers, even I wasn't used to that. But
Yeah, it's funny. People ask me about the wind here. I say, yeah, usually a Wednesday is about a Category 1, on the hurricane scale, but that's okay. Okay, let's begin the show talking a bit about the letter that was sent out by Justice Minister Casey Madu, the minister says if Chief Shahimadi Zadeh, Lethbridge Police Chief, doesn't have a plan in place by mid-April to address the issues at the Lethbridge Police Service, he would potentially dissolve the LPS and bring in another police force. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that our chief is, he's well on the way to having a plan in place. He was working on this before we got the letter from the minister. He and the chairman of the Lethbridge Police Commission had a conversation with the minister before the letter was sent. I also had a separate conversation with the minister, and I have full confidence in the chief and the police commission that they will get it done.
Now, let's talk about something else here. Now, do you want to share any thought on the Alberta legislature voting against the motion to reverse the AHS decision on EMS integrated dispatch? Do you believe it's still possible to potentially make changes on this issue moving forward?
I have to trust in the minister. He's created a committee, a table, he calls it, to discuss the issues. You recognize up to this point, Alberta Health Services denied that there were any issues. When the 4 municipalities submitted detailed technical briefings detailing what the deficiencies were, they still denied that there were issues. We're disappointed in the vote in the legislature, but we believe that was a whipped vote. It was basically the government telling their MLAs not to vote for that motion. So, but we believe that with the minister creating a table to discuss the issues, there is a subtle acknowledgement that the issues actually exist. And we believe that the plan that we've submitted, all 4 municipalities, that we continue to maintain local EMS dispatch, is the most cost-effective service and the most effective service in terms of preventing delays in the event of medical emergencies. So along with that, there is also the injunction case against Wood Buffalo, which we're all waiting to hear what the outcome of that will be. That's not going to be resolved until May. But we all have similar interests.
Now, you actually believe that centralizing this service, the EMS dispatch, is actually putting Albertans' lives at risk. Can you explain?
Well, when there are delays and when all the information isn't transmitted for a response, that can certainly put people's lives at risk. Here in the city of Lethbridge, we've had people sent, ambulances sent to the wrong address. So instead of 22nd Avenue North, it goes to 22nd Avenue South, for example. So that creates a needless delay. When an ambulance shows up at an address and it turns out to be an apartment building and there's no apartment number provided, that creates delays and creates confusion. So yes, those delays need to be avoided. When there's a technical failure of the system, and we have to go to manual response, you're relying on people who have good, detailed geographical knowledge of the system. So, they need to be able to send ambulances to the right locations, and the most effective way to do that is with people who know the area well.
Now, let's talk about the rising COVID-19 numbers here in our city. Now, you've expressed concern, a lot of people have. What do you think is causing these numbers to rise? And does the city have a plan to maybe implement further restrictions as a result?
Well, we've met with local AHS health officials as city council. We asked how we could resolve this, and they did say that the major causes of the spread in the Lethbridge area are inappropriate social gatherings, basically people not adhering to the health regulations, and some faith-based communities that are gathering and again not following the Alberta health regulations, and those are the most significant causes of spread. And the numbers are alarming. We have over 500 active positive cases in the city of Lethbridge. Our numbers have gone in the wrong direction compared to those in the province. It's an issue of great concern, and basically we're pleading with everyone to have the patience, make sure we keep each other safe. Where we're in a situation where we have a significant rise in cases and we see the variants becoming a significant portion of those cases, we certainly are putting each other at risk, and people may needlessly die if we don't adhere to the Alberta health regulations.
Now, we're all excited to see spring arrive. Let's talk about something a little more positive right now. Can you tell us a bit about the city's outdoor patio and parklet program?
Yep. So we're putting that forward. We help design and help fund the basically the outdoor patios that you see that use city colors. But basically, we cover the fees up to $1,000 of putting out these basically, it covers those fees. We also, if someone wants to design their own patio, they can get funding for up to $5,000 to design and build their own patios if they want a custom built one. But basically, we are covering the fees, and it goes hand in hand with our supporting our businesses in a time when they need to serve customers outside in order to abide by Alberta health regulations for COVID.
Now, City Council recently had a lengthy meeting to discuss the proposed mustard seed dry or sober shelter. I believe it's in the north end of town. The motion to rezone for the shelter was defeated by a 7-2 margin, with only you and Councillor Rob Miyashiro voting for the go-ahead. Why were you in favor of this location?
Well, first of all, I support City Council's decision. So even though I was not on the successful side, I do support what City Council has decided. What I wanted to do was make a vote on principle in that we need this type of service. So the Mustard Seed is a credible organization. They operate in Calgary, Edmonton, Red Deer, Grand Prairie, Fort McMurray, other communities, and all those communities say that Mustard Seed has done a great job. The average stay in a mustard seed shelter is 13 days. We in Lethbridge have people staying habitually in our shelter. We need to move people into housing. Very soon we're going to hear complaints from businesses in the city that people are gathering in the downtown, gathering in Galt Gardens. People are staying there overnight. And when they don't have housing, it creates additional problems. So Lethbridge is the only city that is not resolving the homeless situation. Others, I think Edmonton just got approved for 3 supported housing facilities last week. There are supported housing facilities in Red Deer, others being constructed in their downtown. We're making no progress in the city. We all acknowledge that it's a problem, and we need a quality organization like the Mustard Seed with over 30 years experience dealing with the homeless people and with an enviable record of success.
Now, what do you say about the concerns voiced by the business owners in the area that the location would too negatively impact their businesses, much like the previous supervised consumption site?
Well, I think the supervised consumption site and what was being offered are 2 different things, but I think in order to resolve this in the long term, we need to have services here in the city of Lethbridge that provide housing for homeless people and supports. So those things do have to go forward. In a smaller city, it's going to be more complicated. Do we put these in a residential area? How are people going to feel? No matter where it goes, there are going to be concerns. But in a small city, you're close to everything. So you're going to be close to downtown if it's somewhere else. So when other sites were being examined, there were concerns expressed about that. So how do we get past that in our city, where no matter what site is chosen, there are concerns expressed, because we will never solve the problem if every application results in the same outcome.
Are you actually meeting with maybe some other council members to put a proposal together for the Mustard Seed, saying, how about these 3 locations, A, B, and C? Perhaps they'll come back?
No, the Mustard Seed has walked away until we get our act together in the city of Lethbridge. So they've invested over $100,000 so far, exploring solutions, and they're, as they said at the public hearing, that money came from money that had been raised in other municipalities and other locations. They spent $100,000 in Lethbridge and had no way of assisting us. So the next stage, we'll have to see. We'll see if local businesses and local agencies are prepared to work together and try to come up with some solutions. My concern is we might be dealing with organizations that have limited experience doing this when the mustard seed has extensive experience doing this. Basically, I believe the mustard seed has a bitter taste in their mouth about the way they were received in Lethbridge, and it'll be difficult to entice them back and be part of a solution.
Wow. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney spoke at the recent Rural Municipalities of Alberta Spring Conference, and he made mention that global tech companies have been inquiring about the possibility of opening up digital engineering centers in cities like Lethbridge right here, potentially creating hundreds of jobs. Can you give us any more details on this possibility?
Well, I'm not aware of any of the specifics of that, and I'm pleased that the Premier's talking positively about the city of Lethbridge. We do have tremendous potential. With a college and a university here, we have a lot of young people, a lot of people who are adaptable. We also have great amenities like the Tech Connect facility that's operated by Economic Development Lethbridge. I think we are well positioned, and we have a low cost of living, we have a great city, and we have a wonderful ability to work together because we're all clustered in a relatively small geographic area. One of the advantages of being in Lethbridge is we all know each other. Many of the leaders in the community, those who might be working with businesses and working with people at the university, we interact on a regular basis. And I think it'd be, we could have an interesting and a really positive impact on new technology coming to this area, engineering technology, and people working together with very good practical applications. I think we have all the assets in place, and we certainly would welcome that type of interest and that type of investment.
You know, you're absolutely right when it comes to getting to know your neighbor. In a smaller city, get to know everybody. Now, the downside is, in a smaller city, if you cut somebody off, chances are you'll see that person again. So you got to be careful, man, when you're out there driving. You know, that could be dangerous.
Yes.
It's like, hey, isn't that... Now, Lethbridge
Yep.
City Council, right? Lethbridge City Council voted unanimously to adopt their proposed Recreation and Culture Master Plan. Can you explain what that means in practical terms for future developments here in our city?
Yeah, it's basically a reset. So we look at what we have been doing. You know, what type of parks do we have? How do we maintain them? What do people want to see in the parks? What are the can't keep putting the same things into parks. I liken it to what we did with swimming pools. So Henderson Lake pool was a traditional type of pool, and we updated it, provided additional amenities. So that's what we've done with the Recreation and Parks Master Plan. The other thing that we've done is we've looked at people using bicycles and wanting to be healthier, the different types of amenities in parks. So you look at Legacy Park, the new regional park in North Lethbridge, and you look at the types of amenities that are being provided there. They're different from what we did with the other two regional parks, and giving people different types of opportunities. So when we build a regional park, for example, we want everybody in the city to use it. So just because it's in the north side doesn't mean that people in the south and people in the west side shouldn't go to Legacy Park, because it has things like an open air theater facility there. So bands can play there. There can be theater productions there. It has amenities that don't exist at the other parks. So similarly, we'd be looking at things like extending bicycle routes, maybe adding bicycle routes on main roads, and exploring other opportunities to expand and appeal to the quality of life in Lethbridge and address the interests of people who like to ride bicycles or like to have other types of features. There are things like an outdoor arena for lacrosse and other sports as well included in that plan. What types of new facilities should we provide to the citizens of Lethbridge?
Now, Lethbridge City Council recently approved the 2021 Public Art Work Plan. Can you explain a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so we set aside 1% of the cost of our capital projects to the Public Art Fund. And what we do is we try to beautify our city and create interest in our city by adding public art. So that 1% goes into a fund, and then recommended projects go forward. And then that whole process involves a request for proposal from artists, and then that those themed projects are bid upon and then eventually built. So we have some great examples of public art in the city, and what it does is it just adds beauty and interest for visitors and people who live here alike.
You know what? I'm a big fan of murals. Hopefully we'll get a chance to see a few more of those as well from some of the local Lethbridge artists. Thanks for your time, Mayor Chris Spearman, Lethbridge Mayor.
Always a pleasure, and have a great weekend. Stay safe, and again, I would appeal to everybody. Please follow the Alberta Health Services guidelines and regulations. We've got to keep each other safe. We've got to be a safe community, and if we do that, our businesses will stay open. If things get out of hand, it's not good for anybody, and the last thing we want to see is a slowdown in our local economy.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Mayor Spearman. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks for watching.